Ashe, and welcome to another special episode of our Mandatory Mental Liberation Message series, written and produced by our esteemed elder Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, the brilliant founder of Majestic Mind Matters University. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin, for this new episode. The necessity of the Mandatory Mental Liberation series at Majestic Mind Matters University lies in our focus on serving our melanin-rich culture nation. By addressing the importance of knowledge of self to produce greater self-awareness and advocating for our mental liberation, especially for our precious melanin-rich culture children, our messages aim to combat the enduring effects of generational mental enslavement stemming from the historical trauma of the chattel enslavement of the ancestors. Our initiative seeks to empower us to break free from these harmful and unfavorable legacies and cultivate a deep-rooted sense of self-identity and unwavering resilience. Each moment you spend with us is a gift, a chance to grow, to learn, to be inspired. So stay with us till the end, where the real magic happens. Now, let's get started with this very special melanin-rich culture message titled, The Effects of Opioids on Our Melanin-Rich Culture, a Call to Reclaim Our Heritage and Liberate Our Children. We stand today at a critical juncture in our journey through history, a journey marked by resilience, pain, and an unwavering urge to reclaim our heritage and identity. The opiate crisis, a scourge affecting individuals and communities across the globe, has had particularly severe consequences for us, the descendants of a rich melanin-rich civilization. We find ourselves woven into a tapestry of struggle, our cultural expressions and collective spirit constantly under threat. To navigate these challenges, we must recognize and confront the adversity wrought by opioids and the systemic structures that have allowed this crisis to proliferate in our communities. Opioids represent more than just a public health crisis. They serve as a modern extension of the historical traumas we continue to endure. The entrapment of our communities into addiction can be likened to the metaphorical, sunken place depicted in Jordan Peele's Get Out, where individuals are immobilized, removed from agency, and stripped of their identity. This metaphor serves as a reminder of the centuries of marginalization and exploitation that have culminated in our current struggle against not only addiction, but also societal racism and systemic oppression. To combat these challenges, we must echo the clarion call to stay woke. This means more than merely being aware of the injustices we face. It requires a commitment to understand the depth of our cultural heritage, as well as the importance of reclaiming it for the mental liberation of our precious children. The resilience of our ancestors, who survived chattel slavery, must inform our fight against the modern-day enslavement that opioids represent. As we recall the atrocities of our history, such as those unmentioned ancestors whose names have been lost, we recognize our obligation to memorialize them, honoring those who were killed by secret societies and their murders offered under the guise of systemic order. The concept of drapetomania, introduced in the context of slavery as a mental illness affecting enslaved people who desired freedom, reminds us of the psychological warfare at play, a tactic utilized historically and echoed in today's societal structures. The terminology imposed upon us, Black, brown, people of color, and labels associated with colonization, serves to fragment our identity and perpetuate division. This division undermines our collective strength and serves the interests of oppressors who flourish in an environment of chaos and confusion. Racism has transformed into a more covert phenomenon. It lurks in the shadows, disguised as systemic inequalities that permeate every facet of our lives. The adverse effects of discrimination and oppression are palpable, manifesting in socioeconomic disparities, underrepresentation, and a lack of access to resources critical for our communities. This ongoing struggle necessitates us rejecting empty symbolism, politicians offering superficial gestures in exchange for our votes. Instead, we demand tangible results, like equitable healthcare and educational resources to combat the opioid epidemic that disproportionately affects us, ensuring the safety and well-being of future generations. Meritorious manumission, a concept originating from the age of slavery where enslaved people were awarded freedom for exceptional service, still resonates today. We witness modern iterations where individuals within our community position themselves as exceptional, often at the expense of their collective kin. This pursuit remains rooted in the belief that individual success can overshadow systemic oppression, ultimately foiling our unity and shared struggle. Thus, we orient ourselves not only to heal but to redefine our reality. Reclaiming our original spirituality and honoring our ancestral legacy embodies our revolutionary spirit. As descendants of the motherland, indigenously referred to as Alkebulan, the cradle of civilization, we must bind together, championing a movement that acknowledges our past traumas and forges pathways toward a liberated future. By doing so, we reclaim the narratives distorted by history and craft an identity reflective of our triumphs and tribulations. It is our duty to ensure that our children inherit a culture marked by pride, resilience, and understanding. In doing so, we cultivate a future where we, together, rise from the shadows of the past, equipped with the knowledge of self, and empowered to craft our destinies. Let us remain vigilant. Let us remain woke. Our next topic for this special mandatory mental liberation message: how opioids contribute to cultural dislocation and identity crisis within melanin-rich communities, a call for healing and reclamation. In our collective journey as melanin-rich communities, we face numerous challenges, many of which are exacerbated by the ongoing opioid crisis. The ramifications of opioid addiction extend far beyond the individual. They reverberate through our communities, contributing significantly to cultural dislocation and identity crises. As custodians of our heritage, we must understand how these substances have undermined our collective identity and actively strategize ways to foster healing and knowledge of self among our youth. The opioid epidemic has disproportionately affected communities of color, fueling a cycle of trauma, dislocation, and despair. The prevalence of opioids in our neighborhoods manifests not just as an addiction crisis, but also as an assault on our cultural framework. The marketing of these substances has often overlooked the inherent dignity and rich history that characterize our melanin-rich cultures. We bear witness to a troubling pattern, our communities suffering at the hands of systems that profit from our pain while seeking to erase our history. This cultural dislocation can be likened to the concept of the sunken place, famously portrayed in Jordan Peele's film, Get Out. Just as that cinematic device symbolizes a terrifying detachment from reality and self-awareness, many of us find ourselves displaced from the knowledge of our past, heritage, and traditional values. We must awaken from this collective stupor to reclaim not only our cultural identity, but also our power, which can only be achieved through concerted efforts to educate, uplift, and unite. To foster healing within our youth, we must emphasize the importance of knowing oneself and our roots. The rich history of our people, often obscured by terms like Black, Brown, and people of color, which serve to homogenize our diverse legacies, needs to be reclaimed and celebrated. The colonizers' labels aim to fragment our identity further, inculcating a sense of inferiority and division. We must remind ourselves that our ancestral homeland is Alkebulan, the cradle of civilization, which nurtured humanity long before oppressive systems imposed their ideologies upon us. In our reclamation of identity, we have a responsibility to honor our ancestors who suffered in silence, whose names remain unknown, and whose spirits linger in the shadows of history. These individuals endured the horrors of chattel slavery and the brutalities perpetuated by secret society murder cults, leaving behind scars that still afflict us today. We must acknowledge these deep wounds to facilitate our healing. Additionally, the concept of Stockholm Syndrome reflects a psychological transformation in our people, a misguided allegiance to oppressors that constrains our potential for self-empowerment. Our path to freedom necessitates breaking free from this mental captivity. The historical context of drapetomania, an antiquated term used to describe the illness that compelled enslaved individuals to flee captivity, underscores the twisted logic that criminalizes our desire for freedom. This oppressive narrative continues to manifest today as we navigate systemic racism that operates in more covert ways, disguising itself in social structures, policies, and practices designed to maintain inequality. We must collectively challenge these mechanisms, recognizing not only their existence, but also their impact on our psyche and cultural cohesion. Moreover, our quest for social justice has evolved. We are no longer content with empty symbolism or token gestures in exchange for our valuable votes. Instead, we demand tangible, equitable changes that uplift our communities and provide the resources necessary for growth and healing. For example, the ongoing struggle for reparations speaks to our need for acknowledgement and restitution for historical injustices as meritorious manumission, whereby select individuals may gain freedom at the cost of others, continues to underpin societal hierarchies. The original meaning of woke, in African American Vernacular English, AV, encapsulates our imperative to be aware of social and racial injustices. We must encourage ourselves and our youth to stay woke in the face of challenges. We must educate them about our history, combat addiction's effects, and cultivate a sense of pride in their identities. By doing so, we lay the groundwork for a future in which our children can thrive, free from the chains of systemic oppression, steeped instead in the richness of our heritage. The opioid crisis serves as a catalyst for reevaluating our collective identity and the forces that seek to destabilize it. As we work to foster healing and reclaim our cultural heritage, we must unite on a global scale, drawing strength from our shared experiences. By fostering knowledge of self, we honor our ancestors, confront the legacies of our past, and pave the way for a brighter future for our precious children. Now is the time for action by any means necessary. Let us reclaim our narrative, our heritage, and our rightful place in the continuum of civilization. Our next topic for this special mandatory mental liberation message: dismantling drapetomania and the psychological impacts of colonialism, a call for reclamation and unity. In our melanin-rich culture, we stand at a significant crossroads. The historical lesions inflicted by drapetomania, a term coined to pathologize the desire for freedom among enslaved Africans, continue to resonate in our collective psyche. In a world still fraught with remnants of colonialism, the essential quest for freedom, identity, and unity becomes not just a task, but a mandate for us as guardians of our rich heritage and civilization. We must actively dismantle these archaic remnants, ensuring that the distortions born from centuries of oppression do not dictate our understanding of self and community. As we navigate through this modern era, we face insidious forces, one of which is the opioid crisis that has profoundly impacted our communities. This epidemic is not merely a health crisis, it is a manifestation of deep-rooted social inequities that continue to marginalize our people. The socioeconomic disparities exacerbated by the opioid epidemic have led to heightened despair and fragmentation within our communities. The scars of colonialism invoke a sustained trauma, perpetuating cycles of addiction that are often overlooked and stigmatized. We must confront these realities by prioritizing mental liberation and reclaiming our identity, culture, and history. Moreover, the invocation of the phrase "stay woke" underscores the necessity for vigilance and awareness in our struggles. Historically, to be woke meant to be conscious of the systemic injustices that permeate our existence. Today, this consciousness must extend beyond mere awareness to actionable change. As stewards of our culture, we must unite to address the psychological scars left by chattel slavery and contemporary exploitation. The continuous cycle of psychological subjugation, exemplified by phenomena like Stockholm Syndrome, reveals the perplexing nature of our relationship with oppression. It is imperative to recognize how these dynamics manifest in our daily lives and influence our ability to forge a collective identity. Drapetomania, as historically documented, was employed to pathologize our inherent desire for freedom, labeling it as a disorder to be corrected. This dehumanizing narrative sought to strip us of our agency, portraying our quest for autonomy as irrational. In contemporary discourse, we see echoes of this narrative as terms like people of color and African American are wielded by colonizers to fracture our identity, conveniently ignoring our unique histories and experiences. We must reject these divisions, which serve to perpetuate social discrimination and maintain the status quo of oppression. These terms negate our rich, diverse identities and reduce us to mere classifications that cater to the longevity of systemic racism. The merciless nature of racism today has transformed. It may be subtler, more covert, yet its roots remain deeply entrenched in our societal structures. From institutional inequality to the perpetuation of stereotypes, racism operates not only in the open, but also insidiously within our communities. We must confront such dynamics head-on. We need to recognize that societal change necessitates more than simple gestures or empty promises couched in symbolism. Many of us are no longer accepting shallow representations or platitudes in exchange for our valuable votes. Instead, we demand substantive change and tangibles that address our unique challenges and rights. Meritorious manumission, a historical practice where enslaved people could earn their freedom through exemplary service, continues to manifest in contemporary society, transforming our fight for equity into a performance of servitude. This mentality fosters an environment in which success is predicated on conforming to the expectations of the oppressors rather than embracing our intrinsic worth. As a collective, we must reject this notion and instead embrace our heritage, celebrating and memorializing those ancestors whose lives have been lost to the ravages of oppression and whose names have been forgotten by history. In reclaiming our heritage and knowledge of self, we recognize Alkebulan, the indigenous name for Africa, as the cradle of civilization. It is crucial that we deepen our connection to our ancestral roots, rejecting the religions that have been imposed upon us to embrace our original spirituality. We must honor the ancestors who endured unimaginable hardships and strive to create a legacy that our children can inherit with pride. To erect a united front against the psychological impacts of colonialism and the remnants of drapetomania, we must illuminate our path forward with awareness, reclaim our narratives, and honor our shared history. The urgency for progress is palpable. The liberation of our precious children depends on our immediate and concerted efforts to dismantle the structures that seek to divide us. Let us stand resolute in our commitment to achieve mental liberation for ourselves and future generations by any means necessary. The conclusion for this special mandatory mental liberation message, Reclaiming Our Ancestral Heritage, a collective call to action ****. As a collective of melanin-rich people, we stand at a crucial juncture in our evolutionary journey, tasked with the monumental responsibility of reclaiming our ancestral heritage and spirituality while simultaneously resisting the oppressive remnants of systemic racism. This reclamation is not merely an act of nostalgia, it is an essential pathway towards empowerment for our children and future generations. In doing so, we must also confront the modern epidemic of opioid addiction that has disproportionately affected our communities, a direct consequence of systemic neglect and targeted oppression. To understand the depths of our struggle, we must first acknowledge the sunken place, a concept vividly illustrated in Jordan Peele's film Get Out. This metaphor of cultural and societal paralysis is all too real today, stemming from the historical chasm created by chattel enslavement and sustained by attitudes that disempower us. In our collective awakening, we must actively reject the notion that we are mere shadows of our potential, lost in a society that continuously gaslights our existence. We must work together to uphold our heritage, which has roots in Alkebulan, the true name of our motherland, the cradle of civilization. By rediscovering our African spirituality, we can forge a new identity, one that honors our ancestors and the knowledge they imparted. Our reclamation demands that we foster strong communal bonds. We must marry within our own race to reinforce our cultural foundations, ensuring that our heritage is passed down to our children. The systemic forces that have long sought to divide us through colonized terminologies, such as Black, Brown, or people of color, snap the bonds of our unity, relegating us to mere categories rather than recognizing us as individuals with rich and complex identities. These labels have been tools of oppression, perpetuating social and racial divides while enforcing a hierarchy that discounts the depth of our experiences. Moreover, we must confront the devastating impact of the opioid crisis within our communities. This epidemic is not merely a public health issue, it is a symptom of systemic oppression that has historically denied us access to adequate healthcare, economic opportunities, and supportive social structures. As we stand in solidarity to reclaim our sovereignty, we must also advocate for policies that address the underlying social determinants of health affecting our communities. Our efforts should be directed towards not only healing the wounds inflicted by addiction, but also dismantling the societal structures that enabled its spread. Integral to our reclamation is the act of recognizing and memorializing our ancestors. Too often, their sacrifices remain unknown and unacknowledged in the popular narratives of history. We must honor those who lost their lives in the brutal machinery of oppression, including those who were unarmed and murdered by covert systems of control. The psychological scars left by practices such as drapetomania, a term used to pathologize enslaved Africans' desire for freedom, reflected deep-seated trauma we still bear today. Understanding this is crucial for our collective healing, as it empowers us to transform our narrative from one of victimhood to resilience. In acknowledging the effects of Stockholm Syndrome, we become aware of how internally adopted biases perpetuate our oppression. We must reject the emotional and psychological ramifications of allegiance to our oppressors, fostering instead a sense of pride in our melanin-rich culture. This mental liberation is essential not only for ourselves, but for our children, who deserve to grow up understanding their heritage and identity as sources of strength. We must stand firmly against empty symbolic gestures in exchange for our votes. The time has come for us to demand tangible benefits that directly uplift our communities, demanding reparations and investment that heal the historical wounds of systemic disenfranchisement. The concept of meritorious manumission persists in modern forms, where access to privilege is given selectively and conditionally, reinforcing existing inequities. Therefore, it is essential that we advocate for policies that dismantle these systems, fortifying our position in society with real resources. The original definition of woke, from African American Vernacular English, AV, reminds us that being awake means being aware of social injustices. As we collectively rise to stay woke, we must embrace our heritage with pride, educating ourselves and our children about our ancestral civilization and spirituality. Our liberation is not an isolated endeavor. It is a global movement that requires unity and resilience. Through our actions, we have the potential to carve a path towards empowerment, reclaiming our roots and ensuring our children's future is bright, informed, and steeped in pride for their melanin-rich heritage. Only through our collective efforts can we hope to attain the mental liberation required for our continued existence as a thriving and empowered people. I'm your royal narrator, Queen Magical Melanin. We trust that this very special message has expanded your understanding through the insights shared by our highly esteemed producer, Elder Baba Jelani Bomani Dembe, founder of Majestic Mind Matters University, in our Mandatory Mental Liberation Series special message. Remember this, it is essential to honor the ancestors. We have a unique connection to the ancestors. They endured many unwarranted struggles, preserved our melanin-rich culture, and passed down invaluable wisdom through many generations. By honoring the ancestors, we pay honorable tribute to our roots and draw great strength and much-needed inspiration from the unwavering resilience and royal legacy that has paved the way for our present and future generations. Ancestral reverence is a powerful way for us to continually uphold our own melanin-rich identity, heritage, and cultural legacy. Here is an ancient Alkebulan proverb to keep in mind. If you think you are too small to make a difference, you have not spent the night with a mosquito. Remember this as well, whenever you are in the presence of anyone, saying, "They don't see color," it actually means, "They don't see you." We acknowledge and honor the indigenous name of our glorious continent as Alkebulan. This name means Mother of Mankind in various Alkebulan languages such as Akuyu, Swahili, and Kemet, referring to ancient Egypt, and rejecting the terms Africa or African. As royal members of our melanin-rich culture nation, we must strive for knowledge of self for greater personal awareness. Always treat yourself kindly and seek to live a totally awesome and gloriously fulfilling melanin-rich culture life. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. So, like, subscribe to stay updated, and share this very special melanin-rich culture link with everyone that you care about and that really cares about you and all of yours as well. And thank you for listening to this enchanting special message. Stay woke. Ashe.